Traditional Cubism abandoned the appeal of paint texture and subject matter and plays with the idea of perspective. There are two main phases of Cubism, analytical Cubism and synthetic Cubism. Analytical Cubism took place from the years 1909 until 1912 and was more of a revision rather than a rejection. Artists like Pablo Picasso and Georges Braque dominated here. Synthetic Cubism took place from the years 1912 onward to 1914, but even existed through the Second World War until it failed to unify Cubist painters completely. Synthetic Cubism was a denial of European traditions and ideologies present at the time. The whole of Cubism was based on redefining three-dimensional objects. All sides were said to be shown at once. Cubist painters believed they had to show object as the mind and not the eye. Cubist painters did not want to create art based on nature, but as formal arrangements that were real on their own terms. In Cubist artwork, objects are analyzed, broken up, and reassembled in an abstracted view form. Cubists wanted to introduce the idea of relativity. They did this by thinking that the sight of an object is the sum of many different views, and that a memory is constructed by observing things from many different angles and perspectives. Specifically, analytical Cubism involved a close examination of the subject to translate it into flat geometric shapes. These paintings are busy, use darker colors, and have little tonal differentiation. Synthetic Cubism uses brighter colors, simpler lines, and a range of textures. These Cubist painters didn't believe in copying nature, but creating a new form of art, and that they did. Cubism may not be the most visually appealing thing, but its underlying lessons will stay with modern art forever. Cubism was founded in Paris, but expanded into many other countries under different names as the movement became more popular. This is the first truly abstract art style, and Cubism flourished under it. It was both loved and hated when it first started, but eventually made it into the salon, a very accomplished thing to happen.
When Cubism was created, it was considered a revolutionary art movement. It started to evolve in the beginning of the 20th century in response to the changing world. It was considered the first real abstract art and challenged the traditional form of representation. Cubism was an attempt to change the regular traditions of Western art. The movement wanted to change the perspectives on how paintings were being viewed. Prior to this, conventional forms of paintings had been used since the days of the Renaissance. Picasso and Braque, who started the movement, had the goal to develop a new way of looking at things that modeled the new modern age. During this time, many new inventions were being created, such as the telephone, photography, cars, and airplanes. Photography started to take the place of paintings as a way of capturing images. So Cubism was created to create something that would give people a new modern way of viewing paintings. The starting point of this movement was from the late paintings of Paul Cézanne. Picasso and Braque wanted to make paintings apart from the usual strict geometry perspective. They wanted to change how objects were being viewed. So what they did was make an object being able to be viewed in multiple different ways in the painting, so the viewer can see different angles of an object all at once. Cubism originated in France and then migrated across Europe. It emerged as many different forms of art movements in each country. One example being, it emerged and led to the art movement Expressionism in Germany. Cubism has also influenced many architectural designs of the 20th century and is still considered a type of art communication today.
There are two main artists involved with the birth of Cubism. They are Pablo Picasso and Georges Braque. These two artists were around the same age and eventually became very good friends. There is often confusion in distinguishing these two artists' work because they look so similar. Picasso is more well known than Braque, even though the invention of Cubism was such a joint effort between them. Picasso and Braque were tired of Western painting techniques and adopted new techniques themselves. Picasso learned these old techniques from his father, and that made him want to experiment with new techniques, thus the birth of Cubism. Braque is considered the father of Cubism, while Picasso is considered the father of modern 20th century art. Pablo Picasso was born on October 25, 1881 in Malaga, Spain. He was originally born Pablo Ruiz y Picasso, but eventually shortened his name to Pablo Picasso. Picasso was said to have been able to paint and draw before he could speak, and people say that his very first word was pencil. Picasso started selling his art at just 9 years old, and when he died at the age of 91, he was the richest artist in history. Picasso's first known painting was of a bullfight at only 8 years old. He often went to bullfights with his father at this age. As he grew up, something that deeply affected him was the suicide of his friend. After this, he painted in tones and shades of blue to portray the sadness he felt from the loss of his dear friend. This is known as his blue period. Later, when Picasso got a girlfriend, he moved away from blues and went towards happiness and color in his paintings. This is known as Picasso's rose period, though he did use colors other than pink. Then Picasso became the face of the Cubism movement. He was a part of this movement until World War I. He then got sad from not having his friends around as they fought in the war and didn't really pick it up after. After the war, Picasso became very interested in surrealism and sculptures and did not care what other people thought of his sculpting styles. Picasso helped to influence many other artists during his time alive and is still a household name today. Pablo Picasso's main technique in Cubism was tonal gradient. He loved to use monochromatic colors in his work. He also got into collage, the adding of materials on top of one another in a work of art. Pablo Picasso died on April 8, 1973, in Mougins, France, which is where he lived a majority of his art life and career. His legacy, however, will still be present forever. Picasso's breakthrough painting, known as a proto-cubist painting, is titled Les Demoiselles d'Avignon, and it was created in 1907. His sense of space was completely changed with this. Picasso utilized techniques like collage, linear perspective, and tonal gradient. Picasso was a part of many different movements and moved on whenever he got bored with the movement. Picasso even eventually got bored with Cubism, but he changed the world of art with his Cubism paintings. One well-known painting from Pablo Picasso during the analytical Cubism era was Ma Jolie. Ma Jolie was created from 1911 and finished in 1912. Ma Jolie holds a very traditional theme, a woman holding a musical instrument. In the lower left of the painting, there is a triangular form, which is said to indicate the shape of a woman's head and torso. The group of 6 vertical lines at the lower center represents the strings of the guitar, which the woman is strumming. The whole painting suggests a musical meaning because there is a treble clef and music staff near the bottom of the painting. In this painting, Picasso employed the technique of language. At the very bottom of the canvas, the words Ma Jolie are written very clearly in black stencil lettering. Ma Jolie is a song performed at a Parisian music hall that Picasso often went to when he was still alive. The 2 words mean my pretty girl, and it was in reference to his lover at the time, Marcel Hambert, who was also the figure in the painting strumming the guitar. The whole of the painting is nearly abstract because of his depiction. In the upper half of the painting, there is said to be a floating smile of Marcel Hambert, Picasso's lover. Picasso moves further towards abstraction from his previous Cubist paintings by reducing the color and increasing the illusion. This also was the first time that elements of pop culture were used in a high work of art. Each element of the painting is shown in a flattened geometric area, and the words make the painting seem even flatter. The words Ma Jolie are clear and legible and suggest conventional prettiness, while the rest of the painting contains some of the most complex images of its day. Ma Jolie could almost represent broken glass because of all the broken shapes within the painting. Marcel Hambert eventually died in 1915, breaking Picasso's heart. The monochromatic color scheme was used here to help keep the viewer focused on deciphering the painting, a common theme of analytical Cubism. Even with this, though, it can be almost impossible to see what's going on in this painting because it is so abstract. Ma Jolie is currently at the Museum of Modern Art in New York City. Here is a picture that helps to show where things are located within this painting. This may not be one of Picasso's more popular pieces, but it is a great example of Cubist art. Another painting by Pablo Picasso is Guernica. Guernica is one of his most popular paintings to ever exist. Guernica was started April 26 of 1937 and finished in June of 1937. The painting is 11 feet tall and 25 feet wide. Guernica is based on the bombing of the village of Guernica in northern Spain, where no military was positioned during the Spanish Civil War. Hitler had bombed the village. Due to the bombings, 70% of the city was destroyed. When the news reached Paris, where Picasso lived, Picasso was horrified and painted this. The painting is very difficult to decipher. At the far left of the painting, there is a woman with her head back holding the body of her dead child. This is one of the most devastating images in the painting. This symbolizes the innocence lost and the unnecessary, unrelenting violence. To the right of her is the head and partial body of a large bull, painted white, which is the only calm figure in the whole painting. Picasso said it represented darkness. Beneath the bowl is a dead or wounded man with a severed arm that clutches a broken sword. In the center of the painting is a terrified horse that is being pierced with a spear. The horse represents the unequal match between swords and cavalry and warplanes and bombs. On the right are three more women. One is looking at the light bulb in the center of the painting. Another is leaning out the window of a burning house holding a lamp with her extremely long arm. The last woman appears trapped in the burning building. She is screaming in fear and horror. All of their faces are distorted. The eyes are dislocated, their mouths are open, and they all have misshaped tongues. Lastly, there is a light at the top center of the painting, and next to it a tiny flower, which represents hope. In Spanish, bombilla means electric bulb, but bombilla indicates bomb in English. This bulb shows all the chaos and pain, and the rays represent how it affected everyone in the town. In the painting, monochromatic palettes of gray, black, and white are used. This adds great intensity to the painting. Everything appears confusing and chaotic, and there are lots of shifting perspectives, and it is semi-abstracted. Picasso believes that every viewer of the painting needs to make their own meaning, and said he can't give one conclusive meaning to the painting. There are three vertical groupings in the painting as well: left, center, and right. Some say the colors of white, gray, and black could relate to how Picasso found out about the bombings. Newspapers are those same colors which could explain that. That is only a theory. Picasso believed that the individual viewing the painting needed to make their own meaning from the painting, and that he wasn't going to explain his meaning, which leaves a lot to the imagination. Even though this painting was created very much after the Cubism movement, it has elements of Cubism within the painting. There are distortions and changes of perspective within the painting that give it a Cubism feeling. The painting feels like it wraps around you when looking at it, and it is currently located in the Museo Reina Sofia in Madrid, Spain, which is where Picasso lived a majority of his life. As you can see, Picasso was a very influential painter, especially in Cubism. He helped bring on the movement, and for this and many more things, he has become an icon in modern art. He is a common name to almost anyone now, and completely changed the art world. Georges Braque was a French painter born on May 13, 1882, in France. Braque started his art career using an Impressionist style, and in 1905 transferred to the art movement of Fauvism. Fauvism is an art movement centralized on works of art that emphasize painterly qualities and strong color over the representation or realistic values retained by Impressionism. Fauvism relates deeply to emotions and took place in the early 20th century. Braque worked with Picasso from 1909 until 1914 to develop the Cubism movement, and they both incorporated collage elements into their artworks in the later Cubism years. Braque specifically used papier collé, which is using paper for collage in pieces of artwork. After World War I, Braque's artwork became less structured and planned, and he began to paint more realistically, but he never strayed too far from Cubism as he painted in the 1920s. Then, after World War II, Braque began to paint more somber and light scenes. He painted things like birds, landscapes, and the sea. He even got into sculptures and stained glass windows. In 1910, Braque met Marcel Lapre, a model who was introduced to him by Pablo Picasso. Braque and Marcel got married in 1912. During World War I, Braque even served in the French army and sustained many wounds in the year 1915. It took him 2 years to fully recover from these injuries. Braque's first significant show took place at the Conseil Basel, and he gained international fame here, winning first prize in 1937 at the Carnegie International in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Due to Braque's injuries from the war, though, he had a failing health and could not take on any more large-scale commission projects. Georges Braque died on August 31, 1963 in Paris, France. His legacy, too, will still live on forever in Cubist art. Georges Braque worked alongside Picasso for many years and became a very important figure in the Cubism movement. Braque's pre-Cubism breakthrough painting was called Houses at l'Estaque, and it was completed in 1908. Some even consider it the first Cubist landscape. Braque utilizes techniques like collage and papier collé, which is the technique of using paper for collage. Braque also used faceting, which is breaking down form into fragments. One of Braque's more well-known paintings is called Man with a Guitar. This was created in 1911 during the analytical phase of Cubism. Braque created a three-dimensional illusion of space, which challenges the viewer to understand the subject in its broken-down form of geometrical components. He represented several angles at one time as well. In the upper left of the painting, he has a very clear nail and rope on the wall, while in the center of the painting, there is a nearly indecipherable rendering of a human figure playing the guitar. The colors used are very dark and monochromatic, which helps not to distract the viewer from trying to decipher what the painting is. The earth tones in the painting enhance the humanity and organic nature involved in the whole painting. The viewer's eye is drawn from top to bottom. It starts at the top of the man, down past the guitar, all the way down to the almost whole stool the man is on. The guitar is central to the image because it is the only identifiable image in the painting, and there appears to be a finger strumming the instrument. Some say that Braque is using the technique of collage here to emphasize the flatness of the surface in geometric shapes. There is an illusion within the painting because it is a picture within a picture without really making itself known. The man is the original picture, and then the whole painting is a picture of that, which Braque did effortlessly. The entire piece of artwork should be disturbing to look at, but it isn't. Man with a guitar suggests movement and sound, which are both very calming and peaceful to think about. This painting is considered a work of art, although some will find it impossible to make out the figure in the artwork. This piece by Braque is currently in the Museum of Modern Art in New York City. Another interesting piece of artwork from Braque was titled Bottle and Fishes. This is another analytical painting created in 1912. This painting is all about the breakdown of form. Bottle and Fishes is dominated by the monochromatic color palette in cube shapes. Braque's early paintings like this one tend to work more horizontally or vertically rather than diagonally. In the painting, there is a bottle and 3 fishes on a plate that is laid on a table with a drawer. All of this has been completely fragmented and forms a grid-like structure of intersecting planes. Braque depicted fish in lots of his early paintings. Some people think that the domestic subject matter and dull hues in his paintings can be seen as a rejection from his early Fauves paintings, which he was previously a part of. Only the heads of the fish remain readily visible, and even then some people have a hard time making that out. This painting deals more with horizontal lines than vertical lines. The items on the table are ordinary, everyday objects that he transforms into the extraordinary. It is as though the viewer is looking at the everyday object through a prism because it looks so fragmented. This painting reflects how much of an influence Picasso was to him because of the earthy tones and fragmented objects, but he differed from Picasso in this by creating no psychological meaning behind the painting like Picasso did. This painting is more about visual joy and for the viewer to wonder rather than delve deep into some unknown problem. This painting showcases harmony and comfort of everyday objects. Although the painting is hard to make out, if you start with the head on the fish, it gives a starting point to help decipher the rest of the painting. There is still a use of monochromatic colors because it is during the analytical phase of Cubism. Overall, this painting has no real meaning, and Braque painted this purely for the entertainment of viewers to try and make them decipher what is happening in the painting. Currently, this piece of art is in London of the United Kingdom at a building called Tate. Braque's main goal in the era of Cubism painting was to give a feeling that the viewer could move around the painting. He changed modern art with Pablo Picasso, and even though his name isn't as common, he forever will be a part of the Cubism movement.
Juan Gris was known as one of the other leaders of the Cubism movement alongside Picasso and Braque. Gris was born on March 23, 1887 in Madrid, Spain. His real name was José Perez, but he later went by another name after becoming an artist. From 1902 to 1904, he had studied in Madrid. He studied the maths, the sciences, engineering, and mechanical drawing at the School of Arts and Manufacturing. During his free time, he would also draw and paint whenever he found the time, and he would also study paintings with other academic artists at the school. In 1906, he decided to pick up and move to Paris. At this time, he was very influenced by the Cubist leaders Picasso and Braque. He befriended artists such as Henri Matisse, Georges Braque, and Fernand Léger. Then followed the lead of another friend, Pablo Picasso. Gris tried to follow Picasso's journey step by step. Gris at first would submit illustrations to the journals and newspapers written in Paris, and then later in life he was assigned to hired costumes and sets for an important ballet put on by Serge Devalle. He started to become serious about painting in 1912. His first works were inspired from works of Picasso and Braque. His first few paintings showed how creative he was in taking and transforming the older painter's ideas, meaning he was inexperienced in any other way. During the war, he would make money off of painting self-portraits of others. One of his first paintings and most famous as a Cubist artist was of his good friend Pablo Picasso, called The Portrait of Picasso. The start of his painting style was considered analytical cubism, where he used linear grids or frameworks. This was created by Picasso and Braque, and it involves figures and forms being broken down to create a disoriented geometric shape. He first started off using the basic principles of analytical cubism, separating objects in space and using shading, all while not destroying the physical properties of the objects. His approach to the movement was very different from Picasso's and Braque's. He approached it much more intellectually. In his paintings, the distortion is seen as obvious and deliberate. The form is also more smooth and simple. In the summer of 1912, Gers developed a new technique called linear framework, which is a constructed grid that is placed over the painting, and within the different sections, the subject can be viewed from different viewpoints. The Gers dissected his subjects and studies them from a different single viewpoints and then reconstructs the total image from the sections. During the second half of 1912, he would use mostly man-made objects with geometric forms that made for better precision. His homage to Picasso was exhibited at an art exhibit in Paris in 1912. This was one of the most important Cubist art exhibits. This put Cubism on the map and put Juan Gers on the map as a Cubist artist. It was after that he signed a deal with a German contractor named Daniel Henry Kahnweiler that gave exclusive rights to his work. But with the outbreak of World War I, it disrupted his business relationships with Kahnweiler. But Gers received financial help from writer Gertrude Stein, and he signed a new contract with French dealer Léonce Rosenberg in 1916. Gers later decided to paint in his own type of Cubist style. One method was to slowly distort objects and then outline them. It gives the painting a very naturalistic feel. Another method he used was to never abandon the colors. That was a big difference that Gers used while Picasso and Braque did not. He used a platelet of single bright colors and will mix them with black paints and white paints in order to create a range of that color. The colors give the paintings a more abstract feel to it, and he would also fuse the subject and background together well. After 1913, he started to paint in a synthetic cubism style marked by a more expansive use of colors and the use of collage and other materials. As previously said, Gers was a big fan of Picasso's, and one of his most famous pieces was a portrait of Picasso in a cubistic style. The portrait of Picasso is considered analytical cubism, and many have said it exhibits the cubism movement greatly. Gers used many different methods and techniques in order to create this painting. Many of the techniques were taken from some of Picasso's work itself. It exhibits how Gers dealt with different combinations of the head in a more intellectual fashion. The face is divided by a central axis, which is suggesting a full face view along with the side profile of the face. This can also be seen in one of Picasso's paintings from 1909. Gers fractured his face into prisms of planes and other shapes while parallel lines run through the back. The image is then cut with diagonal lines, but leaves the brushwork and color more sensuous. In the portrait of Picasso, he worked with hues of blue, gray, and brown. The broad monotone areas are accented by small areas of blue and an overlay of orange. The skull is cut open, showing and hinting at the complexity of Picasso's mind. The planes then fan out as if they were playing cards. And as you can see, the deep shadow below the left of the head helps in emphasizing the planes being fanned out. The long chin featured is a signature touch of Gers' work, but the repeating jawline is from Picasso's Horta paintings. This portrait is seen as experimental painting for Gers, considering it was one of his first major pieces. It is not seen as complete when compared to the Picasso's paintings that resemble this one. The areas around the nose and mouth are not fully finished and complete, but after this piece, Gers turns into a much more complete and confident painter. Later on, Picasso, Braque, and Gers all showed a dissatisfaction with using oil paints to paint on canvases. They thought it was orthodox and boring. So the idea was to put sand on the paint to increase the quality of the material. This then led to the famous idea of collage. This idea corresponded greatly with the characteristics of Cubism, having representation without illusion. In 1914, Gers created the painting Flowers. He started to use collage elements in his paintings at this time. A collage involves other objects or materials being applied to the surface of the painting, such as paper, and when paper is used, it is called papier collé. Picasso created the first collage painting with his painting Still Life with Chair. The invention of collage was a revolt against slickness of brushstrokes and other traditional techniques. This opened the door for synthetic cubism, to more direct and colorful paintings. The painting Flowers shows a tea table and suggests that a woman is having morning tea. But the hidden second cup suggests that another person has joined her. There is also a hidden smoke pipe in newspaper, and at this time period, it was traditionally men that would have these items, which further suggests that the friend may be a male friend. That was another one of Gauguin's methods. He always enjoyed hinting at the little things. In many of his collage paintings, there are hidden images in the back that are not obvious to the viewers at first. This is a method that makes his paintings stand out from the others of the Cubism movement.
Fernand Léger was a French painter. He was born on February 4, 1881 in Argentine, France, and died on August 17, 1955, at the age of 74. Léger apprenticed to an architect for 2 years and worked in architecture design as well as the photography business before getting trained in art at the École des Arts Décoratifs in Paris. Though Léger's most well-known art pieces are that of the Cubism art movement, he first made art pieces that were a combination of the Impressionism and Fauvism art movements. However, it is difficult to find any of Léger's early work because he destroyed most of his artwork from when he was a young artist. In terms of subject matter, Fernand Léger was very observant of his surroundings and the environment around him and portrayed it through his art. He was also interested in showing nature, politics, and the human form in his art pieces. Léger was one of the few artists in the 1950s that was interested in portraying the human figure in their art. Léger distinguished himself from other artists by his interest in the human figure, nature, shading, depth, the cylindrical form, and machine-like forms. These subjects led him to take his place as one of the pioneers of abstract art. Léger's use of machines and machine-like ideas in his art helped him create a new art style called machine art. Machine art is a style characterized by monumental, mechanistic forms rendered in bold colors. In 1924, Léger made a film called Ballet Mécanique. The short film was a collection of moving machinery, human forms, and abstract objects and shapes. He also added special sound effects to the film, along with music by George Antheil. Another common subject matter Léger used was politics. Léger had enlisted into the army and served on the front line during World War I. During the war, Léger often drew his fellow soldiers as an escape from the chaos of the war. This led him to be interested in creating machine art pieces, and it was after World War II in 1946 that Léger began making very political art pieces. In May of 1913, Léger delivered a lecture at an independent art academy. Léger enjoyed collaborating with other students and artists. In 1925, Léger collaborated at the Exposition Internationale des Arts Décoratifs et Industriels Modernes with Robert Delaunay and Amédée Ozenfant, and in 1937 he collaborated with his fellow students to make a mural at the Exposition Internationale des Arts et Techniques des Laviers Modernes. Léger once said, "Color rushes in like a torrent. It swallows up the walls, the streets. When one opens a window, a piece of shrill publicity blows in the wind. Exuberance of color and noise." By this, he meant that colors are tangible. They have a life of their own. He was saying that color causes feeling and brings about emotion. Léger didn't vary much in what colors he used in his pieces. He mostly used the primary colors. He did so because primary colors are bold and you can't help but notice them. Fernand Léger's art can be found at many museums around the world. He has his own museum in Bayat, France, called Musée National Fernand Léger de Bayat. You can even find 4 of Léger's pieces at the Detroit Institute of Art. Those pieces are Girl with Plant, Study in Four Colors, Landscape, and Rimbaud. In 1913, Leger made a collection of art pieces he called the Contrast of Forms. These are examples of Cubism art because Leger used bright colors and simple lines and shapes, which are common characteristics of Cubism art. Leger used straight and curved lines to differentiate the background from the foreground. Like most of his other paintings, he mostly used only primary colors in these pieces, though he did incorporate some green and orange into them. He also incorporated black and white to give the idea of shadow and space in the paintings. The paintings are not symmetrical, but for the most part are balanced in terms of color and shape. Leger used oil on canvas for the pieces, like he did for most of his projects. The sizes for the pieces were about 39 inches by 32 inches. Leger made the series to experiment with the boundaries between abstraction and representation, as well as flatness and three-dimensionality. The art expressed what Leger called the law of contrasts. The story of contrast of forms is framed by Leger's relationship to Daniel Henry Kahnweiler, the art dealer who played an important role in promoting Cubism in Paris. In 1917, Leger made another popular painting called The Card Players. This is an example of Cubism art because it too has bright colors and simple shapes similar to contrast of forms. In this piece, he began to do more with the black and white paints to create more depth and a sense of three-dimension in the objects. Leger still stuck to the primary colors in this painting, though he again incorporated green into a few spots. There weren't many times that he varied in his color choices for his art. This painting is also in oil on canvas and is around 4 feet by 6 feet. Leger made this painting during his recovery after a gas attack in World War I. Leger became interested in the human form after World War I. In the painting, the helmets and medals represent the soldiers from the war. The soldiers have no faces, no expressions, and no detail. They are reduced to shapes, just like everything else in the room. This is supposed to reflect the war and how it felt to be in it. Cubism was a new way of doing art in the 20th century. It was very different from earlier art styles that were traditional and reflected what was seen in real life. Cubism portrayed a new reality where the subject matter was seen out of the context of reality. Contemporary artists and art critics at the time did not favor this new art form. In fact, the name Cubism was given to this new art style from a derogatory comment by painter Henri Matisse and critic Louis Vaxel, who ridiculed artist George Braque, an early founder of the Cubist style, describing his paintings as being composed of just cubes. George Braque was one of the earliest artists to develop the Cubism movement. His early works were influenced by Impressionist artists of the time, but he began to explore a new way of painting after meeting Pablo Picasso, and together they developed a new way of using geometry and color to portray the world. Braque was very popular with upper-class French society. He received many commissions and was able to live quite well. He exhibited his art throughout the world. He is known for being the first artist to have his works exhibited in the Louvre while still alive. Pablo Picasso was another early founder of the Cubism movement. He was a painter and a sculptor. He is well known for his still lifes and figures. His work was also exhibited around the world, and, like Braque, he was honored with an exhibition at the Louvre on his 90th birthday. Many critics consider him the greatest artist of the 20th century. Many other artists adopted the Cubism style in their paintings and sculptures after Braque and Picasso. One such artist was Juan Gris, who adapted the style after meeting Braque and Picasso. He did many works using cut paper in collages. He also was accepted by the artist community and was hired to design sets for ballets of the time. His work was exhibited in Paris as well. Fernand Léger, another French painter of the time, helped to spread ideas of the Cubist movement. He became famous for using symbols from the industrial world in his work. His style influenced artists in the Netherlands and the Soviet Union. His style was also evident in commercial posters and art of the time. Léger came to public notice as a member of a circle of Cubist painters who exhibited together at the two principal Parisian showcases for innovative art, the Springtime Salon des Indépendants and the Salon des Automnes. Léger's interest in nature, cylindrical form, and machine-like forms further distinguishes his work from that of other Cubists. These interests led critic Louis Vexel to label Léger's art as Cubism. Marcel Duchamp was another French artist who used Cubist style in a more abstract way. His art created a lot of interest at the time, often due to his subject matters and the fact that his style overlapped with surrealistic art. Jacques Lipchitz was a sculptor who worked with Picasso in Greece. He became famous for his sculptures of the human body. Another sculptor who adapted the Cubist style of the time was Alexander Archipenko. He eventually opened a fine art school in New York City. Due to the work of these artists, Cubism was a dominant style in the art of the 20th century. It was viewed negatively by other artists in the beginning, but was adopted by many artists as well. Cubism even influenced other styles of art in the 20th century, such as surrealism and abstract art. Overall, Cubism was received favorably by the public, who seemed to enjoy the new style of art that was radically different from earlier styles of painting and sculpture. They received many commissions and were honored with exhibitions around the world.
Cubism was very important to the development of modern art. It paved the way for unity between a scene and a canvas. It influenced many of the art movements that were to come later, like Surrealism and Expressionism. Many architects were influenced after this too. With the influences from African art, architecture seemed very simple to pursue. The basic features of Cubism, which include transparency, perspective, and asymmetricality, all influenced architecture, like the House of the Black Madonna. Cubism paved the way for many art movements to come and is still a legacy today. Many contemporary artists use Cubism as a form of inspiration, like Marcus Andrzejczak, Petra Stefankova, and Michael Yeat. Art was forever changed because of this art movement, and after critics began to accept it, it became a phenomenon. Society changed with all the new techniques being implemented by Cubist artworks. Art no longer had to be about nature or events, but objects. Everyone profited from its discipline, and for that, Cubism remains one of the top influences in 20th century modern art. It provided a new stylistic vocabulary that remains intact today. Because of this movement, artists now had the courage to change their style from the old Western ways of Impressionists and other old art movements. Even Duchamp took some inspiration from Cubism. Therefore, Cubism should be considered a very important art movement of the 20th century. Overall, Cubism was a very influential art movement that allowed old Western traditions to be left behind so that more current techniques and ideologies could be used and appreciated as well. As the first abstract art style, it came with lots of experimentation and confusion, but its wide acceptance was a shock for all that were involved with this movement, since usually movements aren't widely appreciated at first. One particular interesting fact is that Cubism's first public exhibition didn't include Picasso, which was held in 1911. It also did not include Braque. Both of these painters were the founding fathers of Cubism too. Cubism should be thought of as an influential movement of the early 20th century that focused on painting and showing different perspectives. It should also be observed that Cubism usually focuses on everyday, natural objects that can easily be found. It should also be said that there were many other Cubist painters than the four talked about in this lecture, and that there were even some female painters involved in the Cubism movement, which was very uncommon for the time period. Although it can be debated what qualifies as Cubist artwork, it is impossible to deny the everlasting effects that Cubism still has on art today. Cubism is a movement that still exists today in many ways too, which is something that should not be forgotten. This proves how influential the art movement of Cubism was, and how influential the movement still is today in the 21st century.